She was in full uniform on American soil, so why did they cuff her like a criminal? Face down, hands behind your back, now. The voice was sharp, loud, and close enough that it felt like it came from inside her skull. Sergeant Delilah Monroe didn't argue. She didn't move fast either. Not because she was resisting, but because her legs were heavy from exhaustion, her back sore from a full day in gear, and her heart confused as hell. She was already kneeling on the cold tile floor of a quick trip in Topeka, Kansas, a place she'd only stopped at to grab water and gas on the way home from base. Her boots left a faint trail of dirt behind her from walking through the training field all day. Her uniform was dusty, but still crisp. Her nameplate read, Monroe. The American flag on her right sleeve was clear as day. The army patch just above her heart was impossible to miss. Still, the officer didn't care. He yanked her arms behind her back. Cold metal snapped against her wrists. "Why am I being handcuffed?" she asked. Calm, low, controlled. The officer didn't answer. His partner hovered nearby, one hand on her holster, eyes scanning the gas station like it was a battlefield. The teenage cashier stood frozen behind the glass partition, jaw halfway open, phone in hand. Delilah glanced up at the mirrored ceiling panel. In it, she saw herself, a black woman in full uniform on the ground, being treated like a threat. Her cheeks flushed hot, not from shame, but from something deeper. A voice cut through the silence from behind one of the aisles. "Hey, she's a soldier. What are y'all doing?" It was a woman, mid-40s maybe, wearing scrubs, holding a fountain drink. She looked back and forth between the officers and Delilah. "She literally has a uniform on. Are you serious right now?" The officer stiffened. "Ma'am, stay back." Delilah said nothing. She wasn't about to raise her voice. She wasn't about to resist. That's how things get worse. She'd seen it happen to others. Good people, respectful people, who got pushed too far. Not today, not her. She kept her voice even. "My military ID is in my front left pocket. You can take it out." The officer didn't reach for it. He just stared down at her, as if she'd said something in a foreign language. For a second, she thought maybe he hadn't heard her, but he had. She closed her eyes and exhaled. This was happening. For real. In daylight. In uniform. In America. But what happened next? That's what nobody in that gas station, officer, bystander, or teenager with a camera, saw coming. 2 hours earlier, Delilah Monroe had been rolling southbound on I-70, windows cracked, boots off, music low. Her fingers tapped the steering wheel as an old Alicia Keys song played from her phone. It was just past 5 p.m. on a Sunday. Traffic was light. She was tired, but good tired, the kind that came after doing real work with people you trusted. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun under her patrol cap. Her camo uniform smelled faintly like sweat and dry grass. It had been a long day of drills, logistics checks, and gear inventory back at Fort Riley, about 40 minutes north. She'd been with her unit since early morning, 14 hours straight. She didn't complain once. She never did. What she did want was a bottle of water and a full tank of gas before heading home. Nothing fancy. So when she spotted the red and white glow of a Quick Trip sign just off the Fairlawn Road exit, she pulled in. It was a clean station, bright lights, fresh coffee, 2 cars at the pumps, nothing unusual, no reason for her guard to go up. She stepped out of her dusty SUV, stretched, and slid her card into the pump. "Prepay only," the screen said. She sighed. Her debit card had the chip glitch again. It wasn't the first time. With a shrug, she walked toward the entrance, head down, keys in hand. Inside, the air conditioning hit her like a wall. She blinked. The place was quiet. No music, no chatter, just the soft clink of a slushy machine in the corner. The cashier stood behind a counter with fingerprint-smudged glass. He looked to be in his 50s, pale, tired, gray mustache, glasses that slid too far down his nose. He didn't say hi, didn't smile. He just stared. Delilah gave a polite nod, walked to the cooler, grabbed a water, and headed to the counter. "Pump 3 in this," she said, placing the bottle down. She fished in her pocket for her card. The man's eyes never left her uniform. He glanced at her boots, then her nameplate, then back to her face. He looked uncomfortable, like he was trying to figure something out but didn't want to ask. "You active duty?" he asked, voice low, almost like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "Yeah, out of Fort Riley." He didn't respond, just ran the bottle over the scanner and gave her the total. She inserted her card, declined. Of course, chip glitch. I'll swipe, she said, reaching for the stripe. He watched her hands like she was disarming a bomb. She felt it, that shift, the kind you can't always name but always recognize. His stare wasn't casual, it was calculating. You say you active duty? He repeated. Delilah didn't like repeating herself, but she kept it cool. Yes, sir, logistics officer, Sergeant Monroe. Still nothing. He just nodded slowly like he didn't believe her. She took her receipt, nodded again, and started to walk back outside. She didn't see him disappear into the back room, didn't hear the phone dialed, didn't know that in less than 4 minutes, 2 officers would come blazing into the lot like they were raiding a drug house. Because to her, it was just a gas station, just a bottle of water, just a stop on the way home. But to that man behind the glass, something about her didn't sit right, and that something was about to become a weapon. The phone rang twice before someone at dispatch picked up. Police dispatch, what's your emergency? The man's voice was steady, but you could hear the effort behind it, like he was trying to make it sound more serious than it really was. Yeah, this is Stan at the Quick Trip on Fairlawn. I got a woman in here claiming to be in the military, full camo, boots and all. Says she's active duty, but something don't feel right. Okay, sir, is she threatening anyone? No, she ain't said nothing crazy. Just something's off. I seen a lot of real soldiers come through here. She don't look like the type. There it was, that word, type. He didn't say race, he didn't have to. Dispatch asked for a description. He gave it. Black woman, maybe early 30s. Uniform looks official. But you know these folks. They get their hands on anything nowadays. The dispatcher asked again if the woman had made any threats, caused a scene, refused to pay, argued, anything. No, she paid. But still, you never know. It was a quiet day. The call was vague, but not enough to ignore. 2 patrol cars were sent out just to check things out. That's all it ever takes. Back inside the station, Stan hung up and returned to the counter. He wiped it down with a rag that was already dirty. Then he stood there, glancing at the parking lot every few seconds. Delilah had already started pumping her gas. Her back was to the building. She'd taken her cap off and rested it on her dashboard. The sun was dropping low behind the QT sign, painting the lot in gold and shadow. Stan stared at her, still suspicious, still scanning for something, anything, to confirm the gut feeling he'd built into a narrative. One of the customers, a younger guy in gym clothes, walked in and saw Stan watching the pumps like a hawk. You good, man? Stan shrugged. We'll see. Outside, Delilah clicked the nozzle back onto the pump and twisted her gas cap shut. She reached for her water, took a long sip, and leaned on the hood of her SUV. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, group text from her squad about grabbing food later. She smiled, tired but happy. That's when she heard it. Sirens. Not blaring, but close. 2 Topeka PD cruisers pulled in from opposite ends of the lot, fast, lights on, no sirens. She didn't flinch at first. She figured maybe there'd been a call nearby. But when both cars stopped right in front of her, angled like they were blocking her in, her posture changed. Both doors popped open. Officers stepped out, 1 male, 1 female, hands near their belts. The male officer spoke first. Ma'am, can you put your hands where I can see them? Delilah blinked. Sorry? We got a call. We just need to ask you a few questions. She slowly lifted her hands, one still holding the bottle of water. About what? You're wearing military gear, the female officer said, her tone more neutral but still firm. We need to verify that you're not impersonating. Delilah stood straight. I'm Sergeant Delilah Monroe, active duty, Fort Riley. I have ID on me, front pocket. The male officer stepped closer. Keep your hands up. I'm not reaching, she said calmly. He glanced back at his partner. Stan watched from inside, arms crossed, eyes narrow. Delilah saw the officers exchange a look. Not confusion, hesitation. Like they weren't sure what they'd just walked into, but now they had to commit. But that hesitation was all it took, for control to become confrontation. Delilah didn't move. She'd been in too many real situations to risk making the wrong kind of motion. She'd trained soldiers half her age on how to keep calm under fire, but nothing in her military training quite prepared her for standing on U.S. soil in uniform, with 2 officers treating her like a suspect just for existing. Turn around, the male officer said. I'm telling you, my ID is in my... Ma'am, turn around. Now. She swallowed hard, hands still up. Look, I am not resisting. I'm complying. But I want this on record. I am an active duty soldier, and I have the right to identify myself before you touch me. The female officer looked uncomfortable. She shifted slightly, maybe unsure whether to intervene or stay in step with her partner, but the male officer had already made up his mind. He stepped forward, grabbed Delilah's wrists, and turned her around with more force than necessary. Hey, take it easy, Delilah muttered. I didn't do anything. You'll have a chance to explain at the station. For what? Her voice finally cracked a little, not in panic, but in disbelief. Her face was now turned toward the quick trip window. Inside, Stan stood still, watching like this was a movie he'd seen before. Then came the clicks, handcuffs, tight, cold, too tight. Seriously? A voice said nearby. A customer, a woman in teal scrubs, mid-40s, was standing by her car with a drink in one hand and a set of keys in the other. She's in uniform! What the hell is wrong with y'all? The officers didn't answer. Delilah, now on her knees, closed her eyes. Can I speak to your supervisor? She asked. You'll speak to someone at the station, the male officer said. The female officer finally stepped in. Let me check her ID, she said, reaching toward Delilah's left breast pocket. But her partner stopped her. She's cuffed now. We'll sort it later. Later, Delilah barked. This is insane, but... More voices now. Two teenagers by the vending machine had their phones out, cameras pointed. One whispered to the other, get her name. Get the cops' names, too. Delilah sat back, spine straight, still calm. I served 2 tours. I've led missions. I've delivered gear to combat zones, she said, mostly to herself. But this is what gets me cuffed? The woman in scrubs shook her head and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. This is what happens when folks like you get scared of folks like her. The male officer turned toward her. Ma'am, if you're not involved... Oh, I'm involved, she shot back. I just watched you put a soldier in handcuffs for pumping gas. Delilah didn't even try to argue anymore. Her focus was on her breathing, staying steady, keeping her voice calm. She'd been trained for chaos. But this? This was different. This was quiet, casual humiliation in broad daylight. One of the teens stepped closer. You want me to call somebody for you? He asked her softly. Delilah nodded. Yeah, my phone's on the front seat. Unlock code is 4379. Call my CO, Captain Dorsey. His number's under favorites. The teen gave a little salute and jogged toward her SUV. The officers didn't even stop him. They were still too busy figuring out what exactly they were doing. Because here's the truth. They didn't have a plan. They had an assumption, a bias, a call from a man who didn't like the look of her. And once they acted on that, they had to keep going, even when it stopped making sense. But when that phone rang at Fort Riley, things started moving real fast, and none of them were ready for who was about to walk through that gas station door. Captain Dorsey wasn't a man who wasted words. When he picked up his cell and heard a teenage voice stammering something about Sergeant Monroe being handcuffed at a gas station, he didn't ask questions. He asked for the address. Then he hung up. Within minutes, 3 vehicles from Fort Riley's military police unit were tearing down I-70 with lights flashing. Dorsey was in the lead SUV. No sirens, just urgency. The kind that doesn't need to be loud. Back at the station, Delilah sat handcuffed on the floor inside the Quick Trip. Her back pressed against the soda machine. Her water bottle lay on its side, slowly leaking across the floor. No one had offered to pick it up. The teens were still filming. The woman in scrubs hadn't left. A man in a suit who had just walked in for a pack of gum stood frozen, staring at the scene like he couldn't quite believe it. The female officer finally knelt beside Delilah and pulled out her military ID. She stared at it, read it again, then looked up at her partner. She's legit. The male officer didn't say anything, just clenched his jaw. Delilah didn't even bother looking at him. She stared at the ceiling, shaking her head slowly. I told you that 15 minutes ago. You don't gotta say nothing else, ma'am, said the woman in scrubs. It's all on camera. Right then, the doors opened. 3 men walked in, uniforms pressed, eyes locked in. 2 MPs, one in plain clothes. Behind them, Captain Dorsey stepped through. Sergeant Monroe? He asked, voice deep, calm, steady. Delilah lifted her head. Sir? What the hell is going on here? The room fell silent. The male officer opened his mouth to speak, but Dorsey held up one finger. No, don't explain to me. Uncuff her, now. The silence deepened. Sir, we had a report. The male officer tried. You had a report. She had a uniform. She gave you ID. You put her in cuffs anyway. Delilah rubbed her wrists as the cuffs were finally removed. The skin underneath was already red. Dorsey stepped toward her. You all right, Sergeant? I will be. Thanks for coming. He nodded, then turned to the two officers. You'll be hearing from Jag. Count on it. The older officer finally snapped. Look, we were just doing our job. No, you weren't, Dorsey said, voice ice cold. You were playing judge, jury, and uniform inspector based on a phone call from a gas station clerk who didn't like the look of a black soldier in camo. Nobody spoke. The teens were still filming. The video, already being shared in real time, had passed 12,000 views by then. It hadn't even hit Twitter yet. Dorsey looked around one last time. Let's go, Sergeant. Delilah didn't even look back as they left. But outside, her face told the story. Anger, exhaustion, and something worse. Recognition. Because this wasn't new. It was just the first time it happened in uniform. By the time Delilah got back to her SUV, the teenager who made the call had already uploaded the video to TikTok with the caption, "She showed them her ID. They cuffed her anyway. This ain't right." That clip? It hit 100,000 views in less than an hour. 10 minutes after that, it made it to Twitter, retweeted by a local news reporter who added, "This is Sergeant Delilah Monroe, active duty, arrested in uniform, gas station in Topeka, because someone felt off." The woman in scrubs, her name was Gloria Chambers, an RN from the local hospital, did her own post. Just a picture, Delilah on the ground in cuffs, with the caption, "This is what being black in America looks like, even when you're in uniform." By 9 p.m., hashtags were trending. Sergeant Monroe, help protect black women, in uniform. And still back inside the gas station, the shift had changed. A younger cashier was now behind the counter. Stan was gone. Word was, he'd clocked out early after someone from corporate called his cell. The officers? They were nowhere in sight. Their cars were quietly pulled from the scene by a third unit. One was spotted back at the precinct pacing in the break room. The other one sat in his cruiser, scrolling through the comments under the video, each one sharper than the last. This is what racism looks like. Fire them both. Imagine doing this to a white Marine in uniform. Sue them, sue the city, sue the gas station. At the local diner across the street, the regulars were split. One man sipped his coffee and said, "Well, we don't know the whole story." But the waitress, a short black woman named Ariel, shook her head. "We know enough. She said who she was, showed her ID. That should have been the end of it." Another patron chimed in. And if she had raised her voice? If she'd moved wrong? That story ends way different. Back at her apartment, Delilah sat on the couch in silence, her boots still on. Her wrists still stung. She hadn't even turned on the lights. She scrolled through the posts slowly. Her name everywhere, her face everywhere, her dignity now public record. She didn't cry. She didn't post. She didn't say a word. Captain Dorsey had called earlier, told her the brass was already handling things, told her he was proud of how she held herself, told her to rest. But rest didn't come easy. Not when your name is a trending topic for surviving something you never should have gone through in the first place. But the momentum was building. Public pressure had started something. And come morning, the people responsible weren't going to be able to hide behind silence anymore. By 8 a.m., the next morning, the mayor of Topeka had already issued a statement. It was cautious, legal, full of phrases like "currently under review" and "we take these matters seriously." But the people weren't buying it. A protest had already started forming in front of the Topeka Police Department. Not massive, maybe 40 or 50 people, but growing by the hour. They weren't chanting. Not yet. Just standing, signs in hand, faces tired but focused. One read, "Would you cuff her if she looked like your daughter?" Another, "Real soldiers don't need to prove themselves. Racists do." At the precinct, things moved faster than usual. Internal Affairs opened a formal investigation by noon. The officers involved, Officer Clay Benson and Officer Rhonda McNeely, were placed on administrative leave. The language was soft, but the impact was clear. The video was evidence. The statements from witnesses matched, and Fort Riley had submitted a formal complaint. That same afternoon, the chief of police, Leonard Garvey, held a press conference. No podium, no prepared statement, just a row of reporters outside City Hall and a mic. He looked tired, worn, like he hadn't slept much, which he hadn't. "I have reviewed the footage," he said. "I've spoken to Sergeant Monroe. I've spoken to her commanding officer. I've spoken to our city's residents. What happened at that gas station should not have happened." A few cameras clicked. "I want to be clear. Wearing a uniform, military or not, shouldn't be what decides how you're treated. But it says a lot about how far we still have to go that even in uniform, Sergeant Monroe was treated as a threat first and a human second." He paused. "I apologize to her publicly and personally, and I assure the public accountability is coming." No one clapped, no one booed, people just listened. Because this time, words weren't enough. The damage was already out there, millions of views, dozens of think pieces, hundreds of stitches on TikTok from veterans of all races saying the same thing. If she can get cuffed, we all can. Stan, the gas station clerk, had already been removed from his position by corporate. A company rep issued a quick statement online saying they do not condone bias or discriminatory behavior in any form. But folks dug deeper. Someone found Stan's old Facebook posts. Let's just say his record wasn't clean. Meanwhile, Delilah stayed silent. No interviews, no social media posts, no press appearances. She went back to work like she always did, head high, voice steady, sleeves rolled. When her unit lined up for Monday morning formation, Captain Dorsey nodded once. "She doesn't need to speak right now," he said. "The world's already listening." Delilah looked out at her unit. Black, white, brown, male, female, young, old, soldiers, all of them. And she thought about what it meant to wear that uniform in a country that could see it, and still see you as a problem. But something had changed. Not everything, not enough, but something. It took Delilah a full week before she said anything publicly. She didn't rush it. She didn't owe anyone a soundbite. But one night, sitting at her small kitchen table, the same hands that had been zip-tied to her back just days earlier opened her laptop. She clicked record, no makeup, no uniform, just a plain t-shirt and the same calm, steady voice she'd used in training, in convoys, in deployments, and, unfortunately, in handcuffs. "I didn't want to make this video," she began, "but I think I have to." The video wasn't long, maybe 6 minutes. She explained what happened. The stop, the call, the cuffs. She didn't beg for sympathy. She didn't sound angry. She sounded tired. "I've served this country for 12 years. I've never once been arrested, never once had to prove I belong somewhere, until I was in uniform, in my own country, at a gas station, getting a bottle of water." She paused, took a breath. "I don't want to be a hashtag. I don't want my name trending. I don't want applause. What I want is for people to stop assuming they know who someone is based on how they look. Because if I'm a threat in a uniform, what does that make me without it?" She didn't mention the officers by name, didn't curse, didn't shout. She just told the truth. "I wasn't hurt physically, but something did break. That little layer of belief that maybe, just maybe, the work I do, the uniform I wear, the flag I salute, might be enough to protect me from being profiled. Turns out, it isn't. Not always." Her words hit harder than any press release or angry tweet. By morning, the video had been viewed over 4 million times. Veterans across the country stitched it, adding their own experiences. A retired Marine said, "She kept her cool better than I would have." A Navy officer wrote, "This isn't a black issue. This is an accountability issue." Teachers showed the video in classrooms. Local politicians referenced it in speeches. Even a few police officers shared it anonymously with the caption, "We need to do better, and we know it." Delilah didn't do interviews. She didn't need to. She went back to work, quietly, proudly, still serving, still believing in the country, even if parts of it hadn't believed in her, because that's who she was. Not a victim, not a symbol, a soldier, a woman, a human being. But here's the thing. Delilah shouldn't have to wear a uniform to be respected. No one should. And until that changes, stories like hers will keep happening. So ask yourself this. If respect depends on the outfit someone wears, was it ever really respect at all? If you believe in fairness, in dignity, and in holding people accountable, don't just watch. Speak up, share her story, challenge assumptions. Because change doesn't start with policies. It starts with people. People like you.